philosopher called David Dubrovsky. And eventually you'll be able to read her paper, which so far is published only in Russian, but it will be published in English soon, I think. So thank you very much, Olga, for doing this presentation, which is a subject we've not really looked at before in this group. And it's a very burning, I think it remains a burning question even so many years later. So over to you, Olga.
Thank you. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Okay. So I will continue Andrei Novak's line of juxtapose Ilyenkov with modern currents of thought. But I have other guiding stars, just the opposite, conventionally drawn Karl Mannheim line. Its representative Norbert Elias seems closely related to Ilyenkov's search, and I am sure it is not coincidence that he was also interested in Mozart. The discussion about Mozart arose between Ilyenkov and David Dubrovsky. He is the most evil opponent who argued, no matter what social conditions we find ourselves in, no matter how hard we work on ourselves or how good our mentors are, it's unlikely that either of us would become a Mozart. Therefore, according to him, genius is a genetic deviation from the average level. Ilyenkov, on the other hand, countered that all specific human functions, without exception, and the structures that ensure them are determined 100%, not 90 and not even 99 by, and explained exclusively by, the ways of human activity as a social being. But the problem was, in the Zagorsky experiment, genius was never demonstrated, and Ilyenkov shifted the conversation from the emergence of genius to the emergence of just talent. Relying on Norbert Elias, I want to show that the obviousness of these two facts does not refute but confirms Ilyenkov's correctness. The Zagorsky experiment could not produce genius precisely because genius is a 100% social result. The social determinants of this phenomenon include large-scale socio-historical change of epochs and the associated canons of human feeling and behavior, a complex and long process, but Norbert Elias managed to identify and trace it. It's useful here to start with Kant's Ethics. We will receive from him the necessary definitions for further criticism. A genius is someone, just a minute. A genius is someone who creates something beautiful. Beautiful is what pleases, and not just someone, but everyone. That is, although taste as immediate bodily reaction cannot be imposed, there is a communicability of feelings which forms the aesthetic characteristic of an artistic work. This is the antinomy of taste. So, creator generates something, but it acquires aesthetical significance, which makes him genius, only due to this communicability, due to consensus which is elaborated in it as an indeterminate standard or canon of taste. Thus, canon curbs genius at the entrance to the common culture. The canon is established in a remarkable way. To ensure that consensus is guaranteed to be aesthetic, that is common to all, there is no point in canvassing public opinion in an always localized community. Instead, the reflective power to judge takes account a priori in our thought of everyone else's way of presenting something, in order, as it were, to compare our own judgment with human reason in general. For this purpose, it is necessary to abstract in the imagination from my differences with others. In a taste work so understood, we can clearly see the logic that Ilyenkov called the subjectivist version of the logical, when universality is understood as the abstract sameness of individual schemes of activity. But this logic allows me to legitimize as a universal consensus a preference imposed by me. In my imagination, I can knowingly bring anyone else to such a consensus on terms convenient to me. In real social relations, it does happen, but only under one condition: when I have the power to impose my preferences. Because in reality, the preferences of others will of necessity turn out to be different and opposite, since we occupy functionally different and opposite places in the space of social interaction. This becomes evident in the Marxian approach to human beings as an ensemble of social relations, an approach that unites Elias, Bourdieu, and Ilyenkov. For Elias, the ensemble means open individuals, homines aperti, and is called figuration. In Bourdieu field, Ilyenkov sees the synonymity of this ensemble with Hegelian thinking that exists outside the head, hence his own understanding of the ideal. Pierre Bourdieu, in opposition to Kant, shows in his book Distinctions that not only aesthetic taste is not a disinterested, nobody's pleasure, but also ordinary taste is not an immediate bodily reaction. Both are a stable system of distinguishing dispositions of social space, which is incorporated in the individual in the process of upbringing as a system of dispositions like dislike. Therefore, it is incorrect that ordinary taste cannot be imposed. It is always precisely imposed by formative social constraints. Taste comprehensively sets the style of human behavior depending on the place of its bearer in the social space. It works as an operator of transferring the objective conditions of individuals' existence into all practices they produce, making them practices of the same style. This approach allows us to trace the dependence of the taste canon on the social power of its subjects. From this point of view, Kant's approach displays displays functioning of one certain social canon of feeling, one that is formed when there is a chasm in the balance of social power, allowing the socially powerful to take a commanding position with regard to creators and a legislative position with regard to public taste, as Elias put it. Historically, such a canon developed in Europe on the threshold of the separation of high art from craft. It was a pre-bourgeois, courtly, and aristocratic canon. Norbert Elias demonstrated, for it to take shape, a long-term process was needed. The upper stratum of the aristocracy had to lose the autonomy of land ownership, become dependent on the absolutist state, humble its aggression and civilize itself. The fine etiquette developed in courtiers' treatment of each other allowed them not only to navigate the competition for status at court, but also to distance themselves from the lower classes, forming a cohesive group from which all those lower on social ladder were excluded as not having the necessary qualifications, as Wouters put it. In this figuration, good taste in art, as well as in dress, furniture, home furnishings, becomes a symbolic weapon. It regarded by any member of good society as a self-evident privilege of his social group. It is this group that forms the decisive instrument of resonance. In aesthetic perception, And it is in this group that the very curbing the creator's communicability of feeling was formed. Creators in these conditions were craftspeople who, for lack of social power, had to obey the customer's taste in everything. If the masters did not like something, they expressed it and expected a corresponding change. They hadn't the slightest doubt that people of their position were a better measure of good taste than the burgher musician. While the aristocratic canon prevailed, which seems to Kant to be the universal human norm, high-rank music did not exist in Europe. But on the other hand, the emergence of a pan-European market did not lead to its birth either. Neither France nor England, the market leaders of the time, had high-rank music. This can also confuse a Marxist, because it is not possible to derive such phenomena directly from the narrowly understood economic basis. If we think that an outstanding personality is allocated to one epoch or another as its high point, the fact is that outstanding achievements occur most frequently at times which could be called transitional phases between the canons of older declining classes and newer rising ones. And therefore, our problem refers us to the dynamics of the power component of the subject-subject relation of production in the Marxian sense, because the subject-subject relation is always a conjugation of wheels, in every of which only one vector is aimed at conjugation, but the other at its own expanded reproduction, and thus this relation is always a tug of war, a struggle for establishing the balance of conjugation in one's favor. Therefore, our research attention should be directed toward the change in the structure and power differences implied by this relation. This is a point of coinciding Elias with Marx, of which Elias seemingly did not guess, but he redisclosed it. The scale of figuration in which the dynamics of power balance can be fixed is very large historically. It is a long-term process. That is why the story of genius begins long before his physical birth. In Mozart's case, with the collapse of the Holy Roman Empire of German nation into a great number of small states, which offered everything that one would expect at court, including a chapel, where, like the other servitors, outsider burghers were employed. The multitude of vacancies that arose and the competition of sovereigns for prestige allowed musicians move to another lord, thereby reducing the gradient of social power in their favor, which made it possible to compose while evading lordly regulations and to be in accord with one another, establishing a sort of team and competitive game. The emergence of this music, thus, follows the general change in the social balance of power in favor of rising bourgeoisie. But since music depends more than other arts on court culture, concerts and operas are expensive, its development lagged behind and concentrated around the most powerful court, the Habsburgs. Thus, the social place of genius was formed, a space of interaction in which the creator could introduce musical forms that were not in line with the lordly canon, but they aroused sympathy among the courtiers, who were also under the pressure of absolutist power and longed for an earlier free life. Such a complex game of homologies. These forms would become the new standards of feeling, whose specificity is that they reflect the leveling of power chances, by virtue of which it was possible for Mozart to revolve in the highest circles as a friend of influential nobles, and, unlike his father, he never accepted in his innermost self, his position as a low-ranking person. But Mozart's time in music is a very short period, less than one generation, when there is a sociologically precisely fixed shift in the social balance of power. Already by the time of Beethoven's high day, who was born only 15 years later, the situation changes. In the proportion of social power, artists who have received social protections outweigh the public and are able to dictate to it their own unaccustomed taste. This short interval between the situation when the artist is a craftsman, dependent on known powerful individuals, and the situation when he, protected by copyright, publishing institutions, and professional associations, creates for the anonymous market of a dispersed public a short period when the artist stands in an equal position with the public. This is the time of creation of the beautiful. Further on, the canon of artists change again. The evasion to new path, which the new canon prescribes, becomes the rule of competition for the accumulation of specific capital, power in the field of art. This competition does not consider the fact that the public can no longer enjoy with the new art. It doesn't have time to enjoy it. Hence, the growth of kitsch in parallel with the deepening virtuosity of craftsmanship. To mitigate the abyss of misunderstanding, mediating instances such as art historians, journalists, critics, essayists arise. But thanks to them, aesthetic admiration is replaced by scientific judgment. The artist's effort is now aimed at accumulating power in the field, but no longer seeks to create something that would retain significance outside the circle of those professionally involved in its production. That is, to create the beautiful as common to all. Now, to understand their contribution, one must know the history of the entire competition in the field. That is, to be a specialist, a connoisseur. Art in the new canon, therefore, returns to the state of a sophisticated but artisanal technique, having lost its differentia specifica. Both the aristocratic canon and the canonized avant-garde supplant the beautiful, because they are homologous. Both embody the objectifying power strategy of a single subject. In the historical gap between these two versions of the desire for domination is the strategy of positing others as equal subjects. Whoever enacts this strategy is a genius. The positing of another subjectivity is synonymous with the separation of a creature from the author's will, with that inner completeness and autonomy which we recognize as beauty. Therefore, the emergence of genius cannot be attributed simply to the individualization of the canon of taste. The whole point is whether taste, as a disposition-generating practices, is able to constitute and recognize another's subjectivity. If it is able, it is sensitive to beauty. And this sensitivity, admiration, is in every sense a co-action to the formation of another subjectivity. If taste is unable to constitute another subjectivity, if it is only capable of suppressing another subjectivity, it is not sensitive to beauty and can produce nothing but ugliness. This is what happens when there is a great power differential, when there are privileged and disadvantaged groups. The objectifying strategy triumphs at both poles. This is why the fullness of normal human development is achieved seldom, and this predisposes to the deification of great people, the other side of which is contempt for ordinary people, even for Mozart himself. as revealed the refusal of researchers to relate his works to his life among people, Elias wrote. There remains another, second side of the matter, the individual pedagogical side. We have seen the peculiarity of Mozart and his kind is that they live simultaneously in two social worlds, which exclude each other. That is in a note of growing contradiction. Sociologists call it double bind. I may say that Elias is unique, since like Ilyenkov, he understands the creative potential of contradiction. Gregory Bateson, who introduced the term, considered double bind a trap that destroys personality. But every social elevation is a double bind movement, creating the danger of falling downward. Just as Maelstrom funnel, Elias uses the image of Edgar Poe. Maelstrom is formed from the rise of a mass of water. So with the weakening of the court cannon comes not just a team game, but a competitive situation that forces the stakes to be raised. As one moves upward, more and more of the bottom drops away. Why did Leopold Mozart perceive the atmosphere of his court service with a stable income and standard of living as stale and wanted to escape from Salzburg? He was driven by the opportunity to achieve more, and there was no way to get away from this pressure. As soon as the bourgeois stratum rose upwards, it had no choice but to achieve more in order to survive at all. In this case, there are no states of ascent. They must be produced for the first time, using everything handy as another intermediary link. And what did the poor artisan from a family of bookbinders have at hand? Leopold Mozart at first simply wrote a violin textbook, which proved popular. Then he went further. In 3 years, he transformed his children into an ensemble of family virtuosos, in which the same double bind was transmitted to them, striving for the certainty that everything that was dear to the child, including success with the public, would last. In this family, it meant going out of one's way to work continuously, to produce music independently. The Mozart children, according to the testimony of a family friend, even at play, when moving from room to room, had to play the violin playing or singing. The use of double bind in a positive role allows Elias to see society not as an instance of suppressing the initially productive self, but as a source of forming creative principles, as a source of forming forming creative principles in the individual. This is undoubtedly an approach he shares with Ilyenkov. And to Ilyenkov, in turn, the logic of the unity of opposites has always allowed to clearly see the connection of high art with the equalization of life chances, and to recognize, say, as the basis of modernism, the lack of equality of such, and in the doctrine of the innateness of the gift, apologetics of social inequality. The Zagorsky experiment was built from this perspective. We know from the text of Ilyenkov how he summarized the formation of a creative subject, eliminate the satisfaction of life's needs in an animal way, and then either accomplish the transition to the human mode of satisfying organic needs or else perish. This is a situation of contradiction. Only in this situation, zoological individualism unlocks into a salutary openness, connecting with other people, not as appendages of their physiology, which would happen if an adult only served a disabled child. Others appear in the child's world as subject recognized, anerkannt, by him or her. But it is important that adults recognize the same subjectivity in him or her, the representative of humankind in him or her. Then the satisfaction of organic need will take place in a way that forces the organism to model its own life-sustaining movement, reckoning with the reproduction of the conditions of subjectivity of the other people, which includes their community. This modeling produces an added effort that exceeds organic need. Such an effort posits other subjects as embedded in the form of the individual's need as such. It is what Marx termed the production of surplus labor as the specificity of the human being. In this surplus effort, that is effort which in universal way relates individual to others, autonomous subjectivity emerges for the first time and immediately as creative, that is talented. Being embodiment of the contradiction of the singular and the universal. Resolving it, it goes beyond its own limits, produces the fullness of the conditions of its being by itself, positing the objects of its need as in turn contradiction-driven freedom, that is, according to object's own measure, not according to the measure of subjectivity's specialized physiology. After the first Schlagbaum, that is, objects like spoon, this famous example of Ilyenkov, which should push the formation of the psyche in a human direction, the harpsichord, the violin can take place of the next intermediary links in the unfolding of the initial contradiction. And Mozart had no choice whether to master this mode of action or not, just like the pupils of the Zagorsk boarding school. This is how the habitus of a creator is laid down. But further development, rise and ruin, or stagnation, depended on the vicissitudes of power relations, which either could make them work with the utmost tension and faith in themselves, or constrain and curb. Unlike Mozart, and I would add Ilyenkov and Meshcherikov themselves, Ilyenkov and Meshcherikov's pupils entered the world of stable relations with a distinct power differential, and the maelstrom funnel outside the Zagorsk boarding school did not work. Genius is historically localized in the modern era, and is not the only possible hypostasis of creativity. In the Middle Ages, for example, God the Creator himself was not realized as a genius. Therefore, Ilyenkov, understanding talent as the foundation and norm, and genius as one of its specifications, did not replace the problem at all, but on the contrary, plumbed its real depth. The Zagorsky team was able to reproduce in laboratory necessary conditions for the emergence of a creator, but their sufficiency, the displacement of social tectonic layers, is not determined by the plane of any experiment or any plans at all. Dear colleagues, this is all what I was going to say. Thank you for your patience and your attention. I hope that you will ask questions.
Thank you, Olga. That was amazing. It's really brilliant to be able to discuss these issues. So just for anybody new, please put your hand up digitally, or put a comment, put your hand or your indication that you want to speak into the chat, and then we'll call on you. Maybe Carol could help while he's still here, because I sometimes miss people. So we, open up to questions and discussion and any points that anybody would like to make. we've got about an hour. And some people might need to leave a bit early, so let's hope we can get it going quickly.
Yeah, Sasha had a question.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, thank you, Olga, for this very nice presentation. It was very interesting, especially this comparison with Elias is very original, I would say. I have a question, or actually an inquiry rather, what you think concerning the text you circulated before the meeting, right? The text was an answer by Ilyenkov to Dubrovsky, right?
Yes.
So I would like to know what you think. We could probably read this text or the statement made by Ilyenkov there analytically or dialectically. Analytically, we could say maybe he contradicts his own kind of judgment by conceding to some kind of natural disposition playing a role, right? We could also read it dialectically in that we could say, well, actually, Ilyenkov is not about, doesn't want, is not going to say something on how much is disposition biologically, on how much is socially, because he makes rather the argument that science or Marxist theorists should look into the side they can actually influence and not, so to say, the natural side. So I was just curious what you would make of this.
Mhm. Sasha, can I detailize what contradiction in Ilyenkov with
There's this
You mean-
common notion that, for example, Wolfgang Janssen wrote this article in the book Weser, edited in 2000, this first kind of collection of essays, that in Ilyenkov there's missing this part about like the natural dispositions, because he excluded it completely. In other in other publications, you probably know the article in Communist, he explicitly said no personality is 100% social and nothing else, so to say. So I was just curious if he now makes a new argument in this text, or is this actually a text which is directed on a different kind of level of argument?
It seems to me that Ilyenkov, when he said that there are no personalities 100% socially, that initially we have a body, a live body, but this body even cannot be alive without more wide system, which includes at least his mother, and not only mother, because mother is already embodiment of social forms of satisfying organic needs. So even to be just alive, it have to be social from the very initial. So 100% social being. And I cannot see this contradiction in Ilyenkov with himself.
Yeah, I agree, but I was just curious what you think about that.
I'd just like to read out from the chat, for those who can't see it. Stephen has just posted something, Stephen Mennel, about Elias, essay on kitsch, And he's asking whether his essays might provoke on African art might provoke comparison with European models. Complicated question.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Menel. I did not read this Elias's paper about kitsch. Unfortunately, I would like, but I did not find it so far in the internet.
Well, I hope you don't, because it was published in the collected works, and I'm a great guardian of copywriting.
Yes, it would be interesting, of course.
I can send it to you.
Oh,
But
thank you.
much less well known are his 2 essays on African art, which he wrote after spending a couple of years in Ghana. I didn't really mean the chair to read out my comment. It was
Sorry.
it was intended for Olga herself, and it's rather mischievous, because I don't know what the answer is myself, but he traces three stages of development in African art, and I only have a dim idea how this might connect with what you've been saying about the European situation, but it struck me as an interesting question. But I didn't mean it to be embarked in this group. And I do have to go fairly soon, I'm afraid, but I leave my random thoughts for you to think about later.
Thank you for them, for your thoughts. All that concerns Elias, it is interesting to me. Infinitely interesting. Thank you.
Suresh, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's a kind of clarificatory question. So when Ilyenkov says that he differentiates between talent and genius, so I think he is drawing on Hegel's philosophy of mind, and he also directly quotes from there. So in Hegel, the difference is, I mean, when he discusses the subjective soul, and then he comes to natural qualities. Under that, he says that there are 3 qualities: predispositions, temperament, and character. And in the first one, predisposition, he says that talent and genius lies here, and he says that these are naturally given. These are the qualities which are kind of given by the nature itself, so they are natural aptitudes. But of course, he recognizes that this needs to be actively developed, otherwise it dies. So there is some kind of some natural givenness to it. And he says that talent is that which operates in a given field of the particular which is already given, and it just does something which is like extraordinary in that given field. But genius, on the other hand, creates something new. It creates a genre of its own kind. So, and that's how he differentiates between the talent and genius. So 2 things: how far, one, about the natural givenness of these talent and genius. So what is there anything, any counterpart of this, which is in Hegel? It's there. Is there any counterpart in Ilyenkov's theory, which is like a natural givenness part of it? And the second is, how I'm not quite getting the difference between talent and genius. So I mean, is he taking the definition, difference which Hegel is drawing, or he is making something else of it?
Suresh, I didn't catch everything, I'm afraid. But I may say that Ilyenkov in this point is not in line with Hegel. Ilyenkov did not consider the gift, the talent as a natural gift, no genius as natural gift. Both are social characteristics for him. And the difference is in another плоскость, another, different, yes? But it is socially as well. It has social character as well. Talent, as well as genius, in Ilyenkov is possibility to create something new. Every human individual, just as human, has to do it as normal current of his life. And if we do not see so frequently something talented, the cause of it are social obstacles. Just. And genius he considered as a разновидность, as species, yes, species of genius, of genus proximus and differentia specifica. Yes, genus is talent, differentia specifica is genius. It is a historical result, one of the plenty of historical modifications of talent. It is the only difference, not natural gifts, not natural dispositions. Recognized Ilyenkov.
So just I think I may have miscommunicated it. I mean, Hegel also does not say that it's totally natural. He says that mere talent is not enough. It has to be actively developed, of course, with all the idealism of Hegel, but he also does not say that it's totally natural. He just says that there are some natural predispositions which need to be developed, although it's not that, okay, once it is given, then it will go on its own. It has to be actively cultivated. And in that, I think the component of sociality is there, but with, of course, all the defects of idealism of Hegel, one could say that. But it's not totally that he's saying that it's natural gift. So that I would not ascribe that position to Hegel. He's not saying that.
I'm not sure that Hegel recognized natural predisposition. Yes, for genius, yes, it was maybe his mistake from my point of view. But Hegel himself, как бы это сказать, he was not agree with romantic principle of understanding of creativity. When talent or genius is a natural predisposition or gift, that is it creative from natural. Even in Hegel's own text, we may see that genuine, original artistic work has such a character that it may depart itself from the creator's will. And it means that it becomes another subjectivity. It is initially social relation between them. But romantic point of view is sort of Neoplatonic, where we have a plenty and richness of the one, and it may just degrade or emanate from this plenty. But this is not a creativity. In this case, we have a sort of degradation, but not increment of the being. This increment of the being, which we connect with creativity, may origin only when we have the release to the transcendence, the release to the freedom. And how can be the creator organized in order to release this creature to the freedom, to its freedom? The creator must be social. this is, in general, features the answer of Hegel. But when he, in the lectures on aesthetic, starts to reflect on the aesthetical subjects, he writes about genius as natural predisposition. Yes, I cannot deny it. Hegel was not in accordance with himself, I think, in this subject.
Errol, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just 2 quick points. First, I think it's interesting that in Ilyenkov's final essay, that's now translated as "What is a personality?" that as part of being, and Olga was basically making this point, I just wanted to return to it, that to be a person, to be a personality, is to create something new. Therefore, for Ilyenkov, to be a person is to be a genius. If genius is about creating something new for everyone, then it's sort of the condition for being a person at all. But to go against that slightly,
Yes. Be a person at all. You are right, absolutely.
Yeah. But to kind of to go back the other way, which returns to Suresh's point, and also what Sasha felt was a contradiction, which I don't think is a contradiction. Even in this reply to Dubrovsky, Ilyenkov does say that there are some minimal natural preconditions necessary. So you have to have some level of normal functioning before genius is possible. So while kind of at the top end, he says, we get to a point where it's entirely social, there is a precondition before we can be even social, where he recognizes that actually there are things that can happen where some people aren't able to achieve like full sociality, which I think he's recognizing that there are forms of disability, for example, which in Zagorsk wasn't the case, but it could be the case that we don't have the necessary biological prerequisites, but once they're in place, then it becomes irrelevant and it's purely social. That's how I read his reply to Dubrovsky, to acknowledge that, yes, of course, like the brain is involved, but we get to a point where, because our form of life is social, that it's no longer the deciding factor.
I cannot to see the point where the social life is not decisive point, because the prerequisite for Ilyenkov to be a human being is to be absolutely without prerequisites, to be absolutely flexible for moving in the patterns which is prescribed by socium. And for this, for the sake of this, a life body should be just alive. Maybe some disabilities constrain its wideness, yes, its readiness to move in complex way, which takes from social, yes, but it does not mean that this being is not a human person. If the Zagorsky experiment is an example of this, they had these children have had these disabilities, but it was not an obstacle to master all necessary social patterns to be human beings. But if we deal with such creatures which remained, despite of all social endeavors, remained without entering into social space as blind and deaf children before them involving into culture in the Gorsky experiment or another way. Only in this case, when we cannot find the way to involve them in the social, we have unsocialized beings. I am not sure that these disabilities are fatal. Maybe they seem to be fatal as far as we cannot find the proper way to make them cultural beings.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. It's just, I think he's pointing to the fact that there has to be something that is then socialized. It's not just social all the way down. So it's not kind of pure mutual recognition or something, that there are biological capacities which are socialized. And if we were born not in a social context, or in the first few kind of moments of the brain before it's been shaped by being involved in the social, then it would be different. But I think my point is that it's not just pure sociality. It's not all just mutual recognition. Ilyenkov is recognizing that there's a kind of biological materiality which is then taken into certain social arrangements.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to
Biological
add,
materiality should be
Olga,
universally
just to,
flexible. If not
Can I-
flexible, maybe it will be not human.
hello.
Mhm.
Were you
So-
Yeah,
speaking,
Olga,
Sue?
just to add to what Kirill was saying about this biological materiality, I think in the essay that was cited, Ilyenkov is explicitly recognizing that at on page 88, when he says that he says that on this point I agree with Dubrovsky for this. I mean, I can read that, but it's a small portion. He says that more than that, we would make so bold as to suggest that in this regard, Hegel too would not have taken issue with us, which is that he also thought that the presence of neurodynamic architectures of the individual brain is a sort of derivative in part of the genetically given cerebral features of the given individual and in part of his socio-biographical trajectory. So here also this element of the biological materiality, it's there, it's the prerequisite, it's the precondition without which this sociality cannot even begin. And on that point, he also agrees with Dubrovsky. Well, that is one of the rational points that Dubrovsky is making, and in that also he's also evoking Hegel in that from Philosophy of Spirit as well. So that was my point earlier. Also, that was I was trying to say that he's not saying that it's all. I mean, in that sense, it's all just social, and it just begins out of.
Thank you, Suresh. I think what's coming out is the fact that it's social all the way down, but sociality also can influence genetic formation. It's the dialectic relationship with the social of nature and nurture is much more complex than it first appears, and there's a huge amount of understanding now that since this was written in 1968 in terms of the genetic formation and how complex it is and how it is influenced by environmental factors, social environmental factors. So I think it's worth thinking about that. Also, I just want to say that where Ilyenkov's approach is very much verified because it's by history itself, because the place of Mozart in 18th century social and political history is in the run up to the French Revolution, and many people have commented on this. Many historians of Mozart, the relationship of Mozart's music with revolutionary change, and that this was, as Olga has pointed out, this transitional moment where the old ruling classes in decline and decay, and the new forces are coming into being, and that this was directly affecting the Mozart family. And the difference between Mozart's father and him reveals that, actually, because the father was in a permanent state of existential crisis, well, Mozart as well, in his own way, trying to get patrons, trying to get some support from the courts of the time, and always in a struggle with that. So it's you know, the actual biographical evidence is very much in this, and it bears out this philosophical approach, I think. And anybody else want to? Andrew, sorry, Andrew, you want to speak?
Just going back to the, well, first, very interesting discussion and talks. I think very glad to have heard it. Thank you. I think we can be more precise in how we're articulating the idea that, to some sense, there is a biological prerequisite, and then the social it takes that as a given. I think there's a more precise way of putting that. Not sure I can actually make it more precise, but I'm going to proceed to try anyway. It's something about it helps to think about kinds of things. So what kind of thing is the mind? What is the relation of this kind of thing to the brain? And there are natural kinds as well. I think that's the first. If you put it in that context, then we can be a bit more precise about, well, okay, what kind of thing is the mind? How does it differ? And then we can answer questions like, to what degree is it social, etc., etc. The mind is a kind of thing which changes itself in light of experience. I think that's what I'd like to say. And that tells you, of course, there is some biological, natural, physiological character, because something which can change itself in the light of its experience and activity is a damn complex thing. And that's what our brains and central nervous system physiology are all about. So in that sense, yes, I agree with Kirill and others. There's a natural given. But then if you look at what is the mind in virtue of that physiological and neurophysiological composition, you answer yourself, the answer to that is, we've no idea, because what it is the kind of thing which acts according to other things and does so socially. And so the content of mind is 100% social. The content of mind is 100% social because the physical character of mind is such that it changes itself in light of the social and the physical. So I think that's a better way of putting it, even though it might be not that clear. Anyway, that was just a thought on that discussion.
Thank you. I would add maybe that we will have a live body with different characteristics, naturally predisposed with other temperament, type of neural system. But what of this does matter for being human person? What is matter is absolutely of social character, of social origin. And the other is in Aristotelian sense matter. Matter, form, social. Form is not formal sense, but as a mode of life-sustaining, moving is social.
So, I'll just come back. I do think, yes, but I think because there's the nature nurture thing. You get your heritability, which is a nonsense concept for lots of reasons, but nevertheless, you get this trying to percentage. You know, what how much nature, how much nurture, and there. The reason I suppose I responded to Kira and others is because Ilyenkov's very clear in this essay that it's 100% social, and for the reason you state there again, Olga. So I think that yes, there's this biological element, but that doesn't mean that the cognition, distinctively human cognition, is in some sense 95% social, and there's this 5%. That's not the case. He's absolutely clear it's 100% social for the reason you stated there and I stated. Anyway, I can see someone else wants to come in.
And we may say maybe not biological part, but alive. Thinking being must be a live being. Otherwise, it will be not thinking. Alive, of course. This is predisposition, universal predispositions of thinking, of being personality.
So it's social all the way down. Natalia wants to speak.
Yes, hello, everybody. I just wondering that such kind of dualistic discussion is happening to such a late time, because so far I know, for example, the project reflexology of human reflexology by Vladimir Bekhterev. It was already in the 1920s some kind of monistic project which had in his focus a human being as a biosocial being, and it was the definition of Bekhterev, the biosocial being. We are introducing, or we are investigating a human being as a biosocial being in which the social factors and biological factors are unseparately acting together. And it is maybe I understand that Ilyenkov is ignoring reflexology because his concept of reflexology based on Pavlov's reflexology, and he is denying Pavlov's reflexology. But reflexology of Bekhterev, it is something different. It is also based on Spinozian system. According to Bekhterev himself, it is Spinozian and Marxist systematic, but at the same time, the opportunity to think biological preconditions not in terms of structure, for example, structure or morphological structure of brain, but in terms of movement of signals and speed of response on stimulus. And in this Bekterev's point of view, I have his book, for example, his reflexology of labor. Creative labor is defined as any kind of labor as a reaction of on stimulus, which could be intrinsic or could be also coming from outside. And in this case, talent defined as ability to react speedy, or I don't know, to distinguish such a precise way, precise distinguishing of stimulus. And it is much more nearly to Spinozian understanding of matter or extension as, or this unity of extension and cognition, with then Pavlov's system. And such a big project existed in 1920s is like completely forgotten in such kind of discussion. The discussion is dualistic, strict, naive, yes, social or biological, nothing else. I'm confusing just because of this fact. Maybe you could comment a bit this, but maybe it is just not relevant for Ilyenkov. Thanks.
Thank you, Natalia. I think that Ilyenkov based on Hegelian figure of Aufhebung. And when biological or life moment is aufheben, It does not mean that Ilyenkov neglects it. It does mean that this moment is already accepted in the more complex system. Such a complex system, only such a complex system is able to be thinking, talent, genius, and so on. Less complex system will not be able to do all this. So I cannot find Ilyenkov dualistic, as you may see.
Carol's just put in the chat that, sorry, that Ilyenkov has an excellent text on Pavlov and even an unpublished book. So we're waiting for this book. Do you want to come back, Natalia? Are you happy?
No. I'm happy. I just it is very interesting answer that you don't see as dualistic. So when we are excluding material processes of brain, do we still think holistic?
Well,
Ilyenkov does not exclude brain and material processes. Vice versa, I would say. But he, in this paper, answer to Dubrovsky, he wrote that brain, he agreed with Dubrovsky in this point, that brain is historical product, social historical product too. We cannot take a human brain as a purely natural being.
Absolutely, yes. But for example, from four pupils in Zagorsky school, only one became a poet.
You mean, whom you mean?
Alexander Suvorov.
The second was a sculptor, Yuri Lerner. And I agree that only for these four, the task was put to see how long they may go. For the others, just socialize and let them reproduce themselves, to be autonomous average people, yes? But such autonomous average people make our schools, yes? And to make from this material normal human is a great thing. But to give them more, it was difficult for experimentators. It meant some material and other administrative possibilities. They were limited in this. And the point of Ilyenkov not to neglect biological or alive matter, no, but to formulate the thought, all what is a human person has complex material nature. This complex nature is social, not a nature as such, but a nature which is achieved the level of socially reproducing itself, socium, socially producing itself human will be thinking, not another. Ilyenkov is a materialist, after all.
Carol's put a comment into the chat, which hopefully others can understand better than I. Like, maybe you could explain it, Carol?
If the answer, Ilyenkov was an excellent... If the answer here is indeed behaviorism, reflexology, I wonder what counts as freedom or creativity. I think that's important for Ilyenkov. Yes, I agree with Kirill.
Yeah, and so I think that the impulse to say that everything is one thing makes sense in certain arenas. I think Ilyenkov is pointing to certain things which are particular, and if we say the pens in my pen pots are not social, humans are social. What we're doing is we're pointing to certain capacities, to certain things that, yeah, can be created. Olga has stressed in her presentation this condition about sort of self-transformation. So that's an aspect of it. I think that's different from saying that everything is, that there's these two kinds of stuff. So the reason why Vygotsky came to really enjoy attacking Bekhterev is that he's like the definition of everything reduces to one thing. And it's unclear why there should be a single explanatory framework that explains the various phenomena that people are doing. So what we have with Ilyenkov is an idea that aspects of human culture have a kind of specificity, they have a kind of richness, which is kind of the point of the Mozart point as well, isn't it? Like that his genius is not it's not formalizable. It's not that he processed music scores at a higher rate than others. It's that there's a kind of really hard to pin down resonance where there isn't anything more basic to a Mozart symphony that we can reduce it to. It just is a Mozart. It kind of exists just on that kind of plane. So sorry, that wasn't very clear or concise. Just a few thoughts about relation to whether behaviorism helps us to really pin this down better. Sorry, reflexology.
Could I come in? Because I think I think that's really important what you said, Kirill, because what the point is that the form of the in which the creation takes place, in Mozart's case it was music, it was certain kinds of music. That's the form. He was traveling the capitals of Europe, absorbing different musical styles in Italy and Germany and Austria and even in England. At the age of 6, I think, or 7, he was in London, absorbing all these different influences at an incredibly young age. And that these musical forms he was not just absorbing them, but working with them, developing them, and they have their own content as well. It's not just his individual subjectivity, but his absorbing and working and developing and extending and changing these forms, which have their own momentum and their own content historically. So it's that's what made him an individual, being able to do that and having the incredible drive, which is a phenomenal drive they had to do that. It's just, I'm just trying to bring in the self-development of the form as well through this genius, through this individual, if that makes sense. Anyway,
Penny.
Thank you. Golga, did you want to come back? We've got another few minutes until we finish.
And Andrew and Penny wanted to speak.
Sorry. I can't see these. Penny and who else?
Andrew wanted to come back.
Penny, go ahead.
Well, just following on from what Kurna said, I think that this drive that, to change the thing, it comes out of the relation of Mozart to the music itself. You have to also, as well as his social and family relations, which is family relation obviously absolutely crucial in that he was supporting the family by being this incredible child genius performer all over Europe. But the thing is that within the music itself, there is this scope for it to be changed and to be different. And by taming his own by taming his capacity to focus on other things and to focus for all sorts of social and social reasons on that thing, which is music, the composer sees within the music the potential for the music to be different. So the music itself has a role. So a question that is often asked is, why music? You know, why music? Why do humans do this thing, which is music? Which is another big question. But the relation of the musician to the music is the key relation that pushes forward the development of the music. I mean, as well as obviously the other things like the necessity to please the impresario and sell tickets and all those other things. But first and foremost, the music also has to have the potential to develop into something else.
Thank you, Penny.
Yes, I would add that we seldom take into consideration father of Mozart, Leopold Mozart, a genial pedagogist who was able to educate his son in such a way that he provide a professional contact with the best musicians in the Europe of the Mozart time. There was not internet in those time. It was unique education for his time. And of course, Mozart, Wolfgang Mozart was able to contact with music itself, a social reality itself. And Penny's question is really actual and hard. Why we please with music? It is interesting as such, but it is not my subject matter, unfortunately now. But thank you for this notion.
Andrew, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just on that interesting conversation with Penny, I'm reminded of another point, not quite the point you're making, but another important point about music, which, you know, you can analyze music itself and its logical form and so on and so forth. I'm particularly thinking of the Hofstadter's stuff on Gödel, Escher and Bach, where, you know, he emphasizes the self-reflexivity of Bach's constructions, and relates that to issues in AI. It's not a Marxist dialectical take, but there's an interesting relation of what Hofstadter's take on consciousness, and he emphasizes self-reflexivity and therefore the context specificity, the infinite potential of the mind, because he understands this ability to change yourself as a core characteristic of mind. So there's that feature of music, and he relates Bach's own constructions to having that same quality of self-reflexivity, and he relates to Gödel and Escher too. So I think that's another interesting element, which I'm just reminded of by what Penny said. The point I was going to make was just returning to the point that, you know, the question earlier in terms of, isn't there a dualism here? You know, and when if you start saying, well, it's 100% social, aren't you missing the material? And isn't that dualistic? I think I do want to stress that's a really important question, because key figures in Ilyenkov's studies have felt the same. I note that David Backhurst does not fully go with Ilyenkov's argument in the paper circulated. It says, well, there is a role, an element for the natural biological pre-social, and Ilyenkov's incorrect if he thinks his argument has got rid of that. I agree with Ilyenkov. I don't agree with David on this, and so I think it is important to stress I try and make the same point I did before, because it's not dualistic. What you're saying is that the specific material structures, the specific material characteristics of human physiology and neurophysiology are such that humans change their own structures. It's a physiological characteristic which involves changing one's own physiological characteristic. Self-change in light of reflection on experience and sociality. So once you've got that, it's very materialistic, because it's about a material, you know, a table can't do it. A table just does what it does due to its structure, or it gets destroyed. Okay, that's not what humans do. They change the internal structures in order to act in accordance with, and then creatively produce with, objects. And so it's materialistic, but what you end up with is the idea that your mental function, cognition, is 100% social, because your cognition is a result of this self-changing structure. There's no fixed structure. There's no structural kind in virtue of which the mind exists. The structure keeps changing. That's a materialistic point, but it leads to this idea that the social and the mental are the mental is 100% social, because there's no fixed structural kind. All you look at inside the body is something which keeps changing. There's no identity, material, structural identity to the mind, because all you find in the body is self-changing structures. There's never a fixed structure. I hope that's a bit clear about why it's not dualistic. And of course, it's designed to get over problems like Cartesian dualism, which are going to arrive as soon as you say, well, there's a bit of mental here and a bit of physical there, and they kind of both work together. Anyway, I'll shut up now.
Thank you, Andrew. That's really helpful, I think, and fascinating. There's a little comment in the chat as well about the materiality of the development of musical instruments in that period, which also affect, as you say, the physical body of the musician will be adapting to these new instruments, and they'll be changing the instruments in relation to the body. So there's this another dialectic. I think we'll probably close now, unless there's somebody would very much like to speak. I mean, anybody who hasn't spoken would like to say something, perhaps. I think it's been an amazing discussion. Andrew, you know, you mentioned somebody who wrote on Bach. Would you like to pop the name in? I couldn't catch the name. Pop it into the chat.
If you Google Gödel, Escher and Bach,
Gödel, yeah.
and that will get you Douglas Hofstadter. I can't pronounce the name.
Okay.
I couldn't spell the name.
Gödel, Escher and Bach, yeah, okay. That's great, thank you.
Maybe Olga wants to say one last sentence.
Of course.
Closing.
Olga, over to you. Are you there?
Thank you very much for your benevolent attention and such an activity which is important for me. Thank you, Jenny. I'm glad to see you. Thank you, all of you.
Just one thing, Kirill mentioned some book by Ilyenkov on Pavlov. Is that available in English?
Natalia, да? Natalia or Kirill?
I think Kirill's had to go, actually. He had to
No,
go
he's there. He's
Oh, you're
there,
there?
but he's
Yeah,
walking,
so-
I think. Yeah.
He's walking to his next appointment.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get it off Kirill and circulate it. Yeah.
What was it that you were asking, Kim? Sorry, say again.
No, I was just asking, that book on by Ilyenkov on Pavlov, is it available in English?
Yeah, I mean, if you search for Ilyenkov, oh no, actually, it's only in Russian. Sorry.
We'll all have to learn Russian. That's all we can do.
That's good. Sorry,
We're all at a disadvantage.
I'm going to protest. So yeah, sorry, I have to run away. Bye.
Okay.
Well, thank you all again.
Yeah.
And we will circulate the video as soon as we've got it.
And thank you, Olga. Yeah, it was great.
It was an
Thank you.
amazing discussion. Just to say, if any of you would like to know about the next event, it's going to be on the 17th of April, and we've got extraordinary speaker, which is Andrei Maidansky, who is the curator and of the co-curator of the Ilyenkov archive with Ilyenkov's daughter, and he's going to be speaking about freedom, which actually comes really beautifully with the final part of this discussion, which was actually about freedom, in in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously the greatness of genius is in art is to make us feel free. So that's on the 17th of April, which is going back to Thursday, just for information, and we'll let you know about that soon. I think we're there.